Now I know what you're thinking about. Wait a second, this isn't a Sonic game. And yeah, I'm gonna make the Sonic game eventually, but for now, I want to talk about this cool little game. It's a first-person horror shooter with dinosaurs. And since my dinosaur obsession is back in full force, why not talk about it? So ladies and gentlemen, this is FossilFuel. It probably goes without saying, but we really don't have enough games with dinosaurs. I mean what? Some survival games, some hunting games, and really old stuff like Turok or Dino Crisis? Yeah, we sadly don't have many options in this subgenre. And that's why I was happy when I found out about FossilFuel. FossilFuel is a first-person horror shooter, strongly inspired by games like Half-Life and Doom 3. There's also other inspirations, but I'm gonna talk about them later. First, let's talk presentation. Honestly, this time it's kinda hard to talk about it, because the game seems to be made from Unreal 4 assets, which means it's kinda hard for me to tell what's an asset and what is made by the developer himself. You know, unless it comes to animations where I can tell, yeah, this is made by some small developer. But if I was to talk about how the game looks overall, I would say mostly pretty good. There are some nice areas, some nice use of lighting and shadows, and dinosaurs look pretty damn good, even though again the animations are pretty janky. There's also a couple areas where I think the lighting doesn't work properly, but overall visually there's some atmosphere, it gets the job done, so whether it's made only from assets or something is made by the developer, it's well put together. Same goes for the music, which is, again, really good. There's good action music, there's solid atmospheric music, and I'm pretty sure the developer loves John Carpenter's The Thing. How do I know that? Now let's talk about the sound. It's a very mixed bag. So the guns and the dinosaurs sound really good, which is great, that's the main thing you want to get right. The problem is the sound mixing. Some enemy screams are much louder than gunfire. Some enemies can barely be heard. And then you also have overall audio mixing. Character can talk to you on the speakers and you can barely hear him. And there's no subtitles, so you probably won't understand half the shit he's telling you.
Head of security, Lieutenant 15. We have experienced a massive power drain on all systems. All non-essential personnel are to report to the nearest security checkpoint. Out.
So with all of this said, I would say the presentation is decent. But then there's also the performance, which is a little bit up and down. The game is never unplayable or anything, but you can definitely tell that some of these rooms were not optimized well. Especially this area where the final battle takes place. And now, let's talk about the story. In the future of 2025, Sierra Research Institute managed to successfully clone 2 extinct animals. Because of this success, they have decided to build a huge underground facility on an island near Alaska in order to bring back dinosaurs. Why do they think it's a good idea? I don't know, but that's the premise. You play as the new game warden, who has been hired because the original game warden had an accident. So after you get your equipment and find out the director of the facility is called oh fuck off, you go on the mandatory meeting when the place is hit by an EMP.
What's happening? What's going on?
Not only does this release all of the dinosaurs from their containment, but you also have to deal with Spetsnaz attacking the base, probably wanting the research for themselves. So basically your mission is to get out of there alive. Not gonna lie, I love the stupid B-movie vibes this story gives me. It really feels like a movie where you would see Arnold Schwarzenegger or Steven Seagal. It's just a shame that after the intro you don't really get much of a story, just some voiceovers from a guy who's leading you through the facility, and then there's basically nothing until the end where you have choice between two different endings. The endings that are so abrupt I wonder why they even bothered having two endings. But hey, at least with a captivating and charming B-movie premise. So, how is the actual gameplay? So as I already mentioned, FossilFuel is a first-person horror shooter. It's heavily inspired by Half-Life and Doom 3, which you can tell just from playing it. Your movement speed is okay, but you can also sprint into all directions, kinda like in Doom 3. And then you have open-ended level design like in Half-Life. However, when you start playing the game, you have no guns. And when you finally encounter your first enemy, which just happens to be a fucking Utah Raptor, you have to hide from it in a kitchen. Yeah, love the reference. First you have to sneak around it. Then you need to find a weapon, which just happens to be in a nearby closet. Why is it there? Well, according to nearby PDA, one guy actually brought a gun there because he didn't feel safe around dinosaurs. I think that's cool. So you find your way into the closet and get your first gun. Then you can take out the Raptor, which just decides to come back. And from there you start making your progress to escape the facility. And as you already noticed, there's inventory management and basic puzzles, kinda like in Resident Evil. Now the inventory management, that's a whole another chapter I'm gonna talk about. But the puzzles, other than one more, they kinda disappear after this level. Yeah, I don't know why, but there's just no other puzzles. It's weird. And that one puzzle that's still here, yeah, it allows you to get a revolver. And let me tell you, out of all of the Magnum type weapons in the video games, this one is one of the fucking worst. This is the most pathetic excuse for a Magnum I've ever seen. I mean, the fucking shotgun is stronger than it. It cannot even one-shot basic enemies. So yeah, my personal tip, don't bother getting the Magnum. And this is really weird to me because other than this weird Magnum situations, all of the other weapons feel alright. The shooting itself, I would say, is okay without being amazing, but it's not terrible or anything. It's just that the controls themselves are kinda janky and floaty. And I'm not talking about aiming, I'm talking about movement and aiming down sights. It just doesn't feel right. However, thankfully, the game is designed around it. The guns feel okay, the enemy AI is not amazing, but they're fast and deadly. And because of that, there are some really well done action sequences here. For instance, this one makes you go into underground ecosystem. Seems familiar? Yeah. And guess what? It's one of the best moments in the game. It's intense and even scary. And the game actually has a lot of sequences like this, which I'm not gonna spoil because I really want you to play the game yourself. But dinosaurs are only part of your problem. As I said, there's also Spetsnaz attacking the base. There is a very basic stealth system which you can use in some instances, but you will eventually have to fight them, and yeah, the combat with them is not the greatest. I have fought way worse AI, but these guys just kinda blindly run at you until they get in the range and then they keep shooting you. That's basically it. At least for the basic enemies, because surprisingly they have enemy variety between the human enemies. That caught me off guard. So other than basic enemies with rifles, you have heavy enemies who have machine guns or flamethrowers. You have enemies with shields who seem to have SMGs. And you have snipers who snipe you from a distance. Way better enemy variety than most games have, so I'll give them point for that. So while they're not as fun to fight as dinosaurs, there are still good fight sequences here and there thanks to the variety and some level design. Not to mention the weapons you can use against them, from basic rifles to grenades and mines. In some instances, it feels like a combat sandbox, and I like that. And considering the game likes to mix things up pretty often, the game is fun from start to finish because you never know what's gonna happen next. Sometimes you get intense shootout with raptors in tall grass, or maybe you're now gonna have fight with bugs in ventilation shafts. Or you're gonna jump in the tank! Yeah, this game has a tank sequence, and it's surprisingly decent. It's something I didn't expect in this game, but it's fun, so that's good. All the variety in this game is even better when you realize that the level design is surprisingly really fucking good. Again, this is just made by one guy, I have no idea how he did it. But there are areas that are open-ended, there's different ways to approach things, there's secrets, and even alternate paths to other levels. The level design is honestly the best part of this game. But with all of this game is not perfect as I make it sound, so let's talk about some of the flaws. Other than the janky shooting and the not so great combat with human enemies, I would say the game's main flaw is the pacing. This game is barely 2 hours long, which is fine, I don't mind short games. It's not like it's 60 euro or something. But I would say the first 2/3 have good pacing where it keeps ramping up, but once you get to the tank sequence, suddenly it's all action and the horror just disappears. And yeah, I feel like there should be few more levels before it gets to that point, because it comes out of nowhere. Plus, as I already said, this game has 2 endings, but both of them are really abrupt. But the biggest flaw this game has, and the thing I saved for now, is the fucking inventory. The ammo doesn't stack properly. Every time you pick up ammo, it has certain amount of bullets, but it doesn't automatically stack up to other ammo you have to do it manually. Every single time you pick up ammo. And the worst thing about the inventory, it's fucking broken. So your inventory size is limited, but you can find backpacks that make it bigger. And yeah, that happens. There is just one problem. It doesn't work properly. You get new inventory spaces, sure, but until you put enough items in your inventory, you cannot use those spaces. They are only accessible if you put enough stuff in your inventory. And once you take it out of that slot, it once again disappears and you cannot use it. I know this is probably some kind of bug or glitch or whatever, but it was never fixed and this is horrible. Try to organize your inventory when it looks like this. Alright, got a little angry there, but I don't want to make this sound like this game isn't good. Because honestly, I think this is a really good game. We don't get enough games with dinosaurs, so that's point for that. But then you combine it with good atmosphere, good level design, and some enjoyable action sequences. Plus the fact that it's not too long, so it's not gonna get on your nerves. I think this is overall a really good game, and you should definitely try it. And I would usually end the video here, but there is a DLC, and I definitely want to talk about it, at least for a bit. Raptor isolation takes place 3 hours after the EMP explosion. However, it's in the part of the facility where there's no weapons. And a giant Utah raptor has decided to make his nest there. Yeah, not a good situation for people who survived. It's a short but sweet atmospheric experience where you hide from enemies and try to get out of the facility alive. You have to pay for it, but if you like the original and are as crazy about dinosaurs as I am, it's worth a try. So that was FossilFuel, and if you like dinosaurs and shooters, you should play this one. I'm not kidding. If you can survive some jank, this is a really good game to play. Alright, thank you for watching, and I'll see you next time. Probably Sonic 3, finally.